Hey everyone, I'm Dr. Jody Thomas. I'm a clinical psychologist, a specialist in mental health, an expert in medical illness and trauma in kids, but most importantly, a mom of two who, just like you, is trying to find my way in the mixed up world we find ourselves in at the moment. And I'm here today to talk about something nearly all of us are experiencing, but many of us may not yet recognize or understand. So the goal of the day is to just find a way to help you and your family in this crazy weird time. Because in some form or another, what I keep hearing, both as a psychologist and just as a human in the world, is this. I am just overcome by these waves of emotion and I don't know why. Now, if I had $1 for every time I heard that in the last several weeks in my practice, I'd have a lot of dollars. So whether or not we're talking about it, we are all experiencing it. So let me get right to the chase. This is grief. Grief, you might be thinking, isn't grief for death? No, grief isn't just about death. It's about loss. And all of us are experiencing huge loss right now. The loss of normal, the loss of connection, the loss of physical contact, the loss of knowing you can depend on what you want being in the grocery store, being in the classroom, graduations, financial security, countless missed milestones, and perhaps the most significant, the loss of certainty over what is going to happen next. 1 million losses, big and little, but all with the capacity to bring us to our knees. Still not convinced? Let's metaphorically try this on for size, using those Kubler-Ross stages of grief you've probably heard about somewhere along the line. First, there's denial. It's not happening there, not here. It doesn't affect me. People are freaking out over nothing. And then anger. Why are people freaking out over this? It's ridiculous. Those jerks are taking all the toilet paper. Why are those terrible people not wearing masks? And we're all pretty darn good at bargaining. If I can wash my hands enough, buy enough toilet paper, read enough articles, then I can keep my family safe, keep this from disrupting my life, keep things normal. And of course, depression. I'm so overwhelmed by the sadness of all of this. And acceptance. This is really hard, but it's manageable. We can do all we can to keep ourselves safe and ride this thing out. It's going to have challenges, but we can figure it out. So yeah, grief seems to fit. And it's really worth noting that although these stages are often portrayed in the common culture as linear, meaning you go through them in order and one at a time, that is actually not what the research and theory or any of our experience says. What actually happens with grief is that we bounce around between all of these stages. This explains why sometimes you may feel, okay, we got this. We can do these things and ride it out. When the next day or hour or minute, crawling under the table in the fetal position seems like a very attractive option. So why is this important? Why am I even talking about grief? Does it matter? Well, yeah, it does. And not just because I'm a psychologist who's fascinated by this type of thing. It's important because it gives us a framework for understanding the messiness of all the emotion and the big feelings. It gives us and those around us a way to structure this really difficult and chaotic experience we are all having. It also gives us a chance to do something that can help. So first and foremost, we can recognize our emotions, and helping our kids recognize and name those emotions, it creates a path for those emotions to move through us instead of just feeling stuck and trapped in them. And by doing that, we also create this little space to respond intentionally and not just reactively. We find a place with even a small sense of control, which is really valuable these days. We give ourselves a chance to surf that emotion wave instead of just getting our butt kicked by it. Because as the famed grief expert Dr. David Kessler so wisely points out, emotion needs motion. That's important. Really, really important. Especially in this time of ongoing grief, where the losses keep coming and we are tasked with moving forward despite it all. So thinking about this as grief also invites compassion for ourselves and for others. And if we look through the lens of they are hurting too, It creates a bit more space for kindness and understanding for our kids' meltdown, our colleagues' missed deadline, our partner's less than kind snarky comment, or our own less than spectacular moments. And instead of asking ourselves those really shame-inducing questions of, why aren't I handling this better? Why do I feel so emotional and overwhelmed? We can say to ourselves, and to that often very troublemaking inner voice, it's because I'm normal. It's because I'm human. It's because this is what it's like to be human in the face of great tragedy. Because this is the painful, unavoidable, but ultimately productive process of grief. And what I want you to hear loud and clear is this isn't you or me or your kids failing. Feeling isn't failing. No matter what dysfunctional messages we may have gotten in our past or even getting in our present, we have this myth in our culture that sadness and grief are bad. They're to be avoided at all costs. We must run away from them, deny their existence. And if we're going to be strong. Well, if there was ever a time where the shortcomings of that persistent and incredibly unhelpful myth were apparent, it's now. Holding on to that myth holds people back. And to move from feeling paralyzed and overwhelmed, we have to shift from seeing those big and hard feelings as being productive and helping us move through this ridiculously painful and stressful time. So the metaphor I often use for that is this. Those waves of emotion are just like the waves in the ocean. And anyone who's ever spent time playing in the surf knows you can't fight the waves with brute strength. No matter how strong you are or how far you dig your heels into the sand, you're still going to get your butt kicked when that big wave comes. And you know it won't go well if you choose to turn your back to those waves and pretend they aren't there. Do that, and you're just going to get your bell rung and your feet swept out from under you when you least expect it. You have to learn to face the waves and learn to work with them, jump over, dive under, surf them until they peter out on their own. And to learn that, you have to accept the fact that you're going to find yourself floundering in the water sometimes. But each time you face a wave head on, you get better and better at knowing how to keep your head above water. Now, I know a lot of this is not really what anyone wants to hear because, hey, I didn't say this is going to be easy. But no matter how we wish it or how we twist ourselves into knots, it can't be easy because grief never is. But we can make it a path forward by embracing the hard parts as necessary and at least propelling us onward. And there are things we can do that helps. So what does help? How do we manage this huge experience above recognizing those emotions? Really, one of the things that truly helps is to feed each other. Sometimes literally, but mostly metaphorically. Because helping someone else helps us. And the most powerful way to do this, especially in situations where we have little control, is to bear witness to each other's pain. To be with someone in their hurt so they don't have to go it alone. And in the middle of all this hard, it's a pretty incredible experience to experience for yourself that healing power of truly being with someone in their pain. Not fixing, not changing, not judging, just being. Try it out for yourself. The next time your kid is losing it, just get on the floor with them. Hug them. Say things like, I'm sorry it's so hard. It's hard for me too. It's normal to feel this way. And the all-powerful and all-useful, I love you and I'm here. I'm willing to bet a lot of money that you can be pretty amazed at how it can make you and that person you're feeling feel better. So finally, let's really work hard to stay away from judgment. We're not going to altogether. Lord knows we're all human, but at least when we see it, we can walk away from it a little more quickly. We have to remember that everyone deals with things differently. Your teen might seem really irrational and irritable. Your formerly independent 9-year-old may be really clingy, or your partner really hyper-focused on work or obsessive about sanitizing. And on the surface, that all might seem ridiculous and annoying to your way of seeing things. But really, it's about huge emotional turmoil that they might not know how to manage. So the potential for conflict and feeling disconnected from our nearest and dearest is huge right now and really unhelpful. And it said that grief can be the loneliest of emotions because everyone goes through it their own way. But let's remember this. Grief doesn't cause separation. The judgment of grief does. And the moment we step away from that judgment, we step toward each other and that comfort of connection. Dr. Kessler also recently added another stage of grief, finding meaning. And we'll get there too. You may already be playing with the idea of how this crazy experience changes life, you, your family, your expectations, in even some positive ways. But sadly, while finding meaning is really powerful, none of us can use it to skip over the hard feelings part. And believe me, I've tried. It just can give you some cushion to work with a little more ease, a little more grace. It can make it just that easier to surf the next really big wave. So that's really it for the moment, and I hope any of this was helpful and useful. And please let us know what else you think we could do, and we'll see you next time, because we're all in this together.